Welcome to the Red Caps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on about old school games. In today's episode, I'm going to sit down with Russ from YumDM, and we are going to talk about his amazing zine, the D12 Monthly. It's a zine that will bring back feelings of the old Dragon and Dungeon magazines. You should definitely be checking it out. But we're going to talk about what it takes to stay consistent and constantly put out issues of that zine. Over 20 plus issues are out now. We're going to talk about what the process of the creation is. We'll talk about how perfect is the enemy of good. And I do apologize because this episode is coming out a bit late, but I highly recommend you sit down and listen to the whole thing. I think it was well worth it. It was a very fun interview. So, since no mortal can outrun a red cap, I hope you can sit back, listen, and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by Russ, known as YumDM. You have almost certainly seen his monthly zine that comes out every month, the D12 Monthly. Welcome, Russ, from Australia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
I got to do the same joke that I've done with the last 4 or 5 people from Australia that's come on. Tell me about the future. What's it going to be like tomorrow?
Hot.
It's. I would hope so, but I doubt that's going to hold true for me. Up here in Canada, it's pretty cold outside. I've got a giant ice cube in my backyard for a skating rink that me and my son have been using. So I don't think that was survive where you're at.
Wild winter weather.
It's not as bad as it was. There's definitely been climate changes because when I was a kid, there would have been snow starting in November all the way through, and we didn't really get any snow until January, where I'm at now. And it's been like that for a few years. So it's not as bad as it was when I was a kid. So I can do the old man. Back in my day, we had snow back.
maybe the amount of snow just looked more because you were so small.
That is also possible, but I'm going to go with my version where
fair enough.
Where it was catastrophic snowstorms all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I was mentioning, you have a monthly zine that you put out every month called D12 Monthly. You just put out issue 20. Congratulations.
Yes. So it's actually the 21st issue because I started with issue 0 stupidly.
And no, as all good computer professionals would, as all IT professionals do, you start at 0 and you count forward.
Yeah, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And because I just wanted to test the water, and I thought, like how you have session 0, I'd be kind of cool and call it issue 0. I don't think anyone got the connection. And now they go, you've done 20 issues. Well, I actually done 21. So, but yeah, it was only 8 pages. So
you got to pull what Gavin did with OSC and the Carcass Crawler and make that first one exclusive and hard to get, so everybody's clamoring for it because they don't have the full set.
I should bring out special issues.
That very first issue of Carcass Crawler they put out, I don't know how many people I see asking for because he only offered it with, I forget what the Kickstarter was now, but it was exclusive to Kickstarter, and that he never really said.
Oh, okay. Maybe I've got issue 2 because I've got one of them. Maybe it was issue 2 that I got. I don't know.
But to do anything 21 times in a row is a testament. Has there been any months that you've missed?
Yeah, I was about to say I've missed 2. One, I think I was about 3 issues in, and I got diagnosed with a fairly horrible disease. And the shock of that made me go, maybe I'll just take a break. So I missed an episode, and then after the initial shock of everything, I just went, no, I need to do this, get my mind off it and keep going. And I was determined to keep going with it. So I only missed 1 issue then. And then I missed an issue fairly recently. I think it was 18 or something. And because I had COVID, and I just got really fatigued. And because of my sort of past medical history, I was fatigued anyway. So it was like a double hit, and I just couldn't focus on it. And I didn't want to sort of rush it and bring out something that was substandard. And that I wasn't happy with just to bring something out. And so my patrons are pretty good with that. I usually pause it for the month that I don't publish anything, but they're all like, you should just keep it going. We don't care. I'm like, no, you're paying me to do something. If I'm not doing it, I don't, I feel bad taking the money. So, so I've missed 2 in about a year and a half. I guess, of doing it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, missing something for serious health issues, I don't think anybody's gonna hold that against you. That it wasn't so much of you're like, I don't feel like doing this right now. There was a
No.
legitimate reason for it.
They were both pretty serious medical issues.
So
Yeah.
outside of those, though, whenever you're sitting down, when you're in relatively decent health, or when you're feeling well enough to trudge on with it, what is the biggest challenge outside of health related issues to getting a consistent schedule every time?
I probably need to explain how it got started to explain that.
Yeah, actually, that's probably I jumped way ahead. Yeah. How did it start?
No. So when I first started, I thought, okay, I want to do a YouTube channel. I just want to be another talking head. And then I sort of started trying to get into it, and then I was like, I just couldn't find the time to sit down and record like an hour video or half-hour video or even 10 minutes. And then I kind of hate editing anyway. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll just do it live and then just put it up and then not worry about the editing. And then I just couldn't find the time. I just couldn't. And I kind of also probably had in the back of my mind, all this stuff had been talked about and done, all the stuff that I came up with that I wanted to talk about. I kind of see other people talking about it, and I wasn't really going to add that much. And so I've always liked writing. And then actually, ironically, I saw a YouTube clip on how to create a zine in 10 minutes, like how to put it together, sort of and it was all just using Google Docs. And I went, and a light bulb went off, and I went, I can do this, and I can do it in bits. So I can, if I got 10 minutes here, I've got an hour here, I can just write, and then the ideas sort of come. If I'm wake up in the middle of the night, I can write down an idea that I've had, and then expand on that the next day. And so I can do it in fits and starts. So it just worked for my schedule way better than sitting down and creating a video and having a setup, because I really don't have the room for a video setup either. And so it just worked better. And so I followed the video, which I credit in issue 0 if anyone's interested. And then just sort of played around with Google Docs to get a format that I liked. And people are probably fairly familiar. Funnily enough, it actually is very much the same as Carcass Crawler, which we just talked about, in the format. And it wasn't meant that way from my perspective, whether they just stole my idea, or whether they stole the guy's idea, or the guy stole their idea for formatting, and then I just copied that, and it just ended up being the same. But it kind of worked out, because I kind of figure a lot of the people who probably buy Carcass Crawler probably download my zine as well, so there's a lot of crossover. So it kind of fits well from a design point of view. And from my perspective, I'm not a graphic designer at all, and so I've taken that element out, because the way I kind of see zine creation is content, the structure, and the way it looks and feels, and then the art. So you've got the writing, the art, and then the graphic design elements. I kind of took the graphic design element out, because 1, I'm not very good at it, and 2, it just would take up way too much time, and there's no way I could do it monthly. And so I kind of took that design element out of the picture by just having a standard template that I use every single time. And that means that I can speed up production. So all I need to focus on, and I don't do any of the art, I just use a lot of stock art, probably 90% stock art at the moment, until I get sort of to the point where I can financially afford to pay artists each time. Although I do use some artists depending on on what they charge. And so that's kind of fairly easy. And then all it is just the writing, and I can just sit down and write, and I can write about role playing. Like, I've had 30 plus years of playing, so there's so much going around in my head, especially in the fantasy genre, which is just a passion of mine. I call it my home. I'll play other genres and other games, but when it all comes down to it, my passion is fantasy, which is why I guess the zine is purely fantasy. And so that's probably the long answer of how I can generate something every month, is because I've sort of taken a kind of I guess a industrialized sort of way of creating it, but it's still creative in the way that I just make everything up.
So you've kind of removed what you saw would be the tripping stones for you. You kick those stones out of the way by standardizing, and then you can just focus on the stuff that's actually fun for you, and you can go through that.
Yeah, I also think, just on that point, I also think that I see a lot of zines which come out, I kickstarted, and especially this being zine month, and they're all like artistic creations, and as much as I admire that, and I'm sure there's great content in there as well, I wanted to create a zine that was just functional and had really good content in it. And so I didn't want it to be a collector's art piece. I wanted it to be used. I wanted it to be abused. I wanted it to be printed out and used so much that the pages are ripping and and there's stains on it, and because people are using it at the table and someone spilt their Coke on it. I want that's how I want the zine. I don't want it to be a collector's art piece sitting on somebody's shelf. I wanted to create a zine that I would use, and that I just did not see in the market at all. Like if someone had been doing what I was doing, as regularly, I would be all over it, and I wouldn't be doing mine. But right. I didn't see what I was doing in the market, and I just wanted to do that because, one, I wanted to do it, and I wanted to give back to the community and all that sort of stuff. But I just wanted it because I wanted it, and I use my stuff all the time. So I think that's kind of the difference, I think, that I find my zine compared to most zines out there. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Like we were saying, you've removed some of the things that would slow a person down, and doing. I mean, one of my favorite, if you want to even call it a zine, because it's so big at this point, it's basically a book that just comes out, is the Knock zine, if you want to call it Knock a zine. And they can only release that once or twice a year due to the production around it. But if you're releasing every month and you're trying to stay on that schedule, how far ahead are you generally? Are you like eking in right at the end of at the end of one month, so you got it for the next month, or is it? Do you have like a month or two ahead of time where you've got most of the stuff done?
I would really love to say that I'm a month or two ahead. I'm trying to get there now. Like I think I've made the mistake for too long of just doing it the month to month. I have ideas if I'm writing something because each zine has a particular theme.
Yep.
So if I'm writing something, I'm currently working on the mountains and the hills and mountain one. Which is sort of part of a mini series of the traditional terrain you find in D&D, like plains and forests. And so I've done the swamp and the marshes one. I've done the forests. The the desert and badlands one, which was the last one that just came out. So there's sort of like a mini sort of series of the terrain. So I might, if I'm working on hills and mountains at the moment, I might have an idea for forests, which is the next one, which I'll write a sort of basic outline for. So I kind of have ideas sort of bubbling away, but I would love to be 2 months ahead of schedule, and I'm trying to get there now. Like I'm really trying hard to get to the point where I'm writing. But sometimes my brain gets confused too. Like if I'm working on one, I kind of like working month to month only because if I'm really dedicated to that, and then I'll, but if I might say something online where I've been kind of ahead of myself. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm talking about one that's not even out yet.
No, it completely makes sense. I mean, for listeners that are here, like right before we started this conversation, I had to pause you for a minute because I had realized I had made a mistake on the episode right well, it may be the one before this one, I don't know, but the episode with the Arcane Bindery, that's just what live today as we're talking. I had to go back and make a correction on that because I had recorded it and it had been sitting for a couple of days. And I had forgotten that there had been an issue in the middle of that episode. So if I get too far ahead, sometimes if I've got a collection of work that I'm queuing up to publish later, I can sometimes forget stuff that I meant to go. And like the only reason I remembered it was as I sat down to talk to you. I've got a little notebook here in front of me for things to jot down of notes as I'm having the conversation with folks. And one of the notes I had on the page was, "Don't forget about the power outage at this timestamp." And I went, I completely forgot about the power outage at that timestamp. But it's so past me did a great job of leaving that note. Just current me just didn't even look at it before I put it out there. But yeah, so I think that's, you can run that risk. It's funny, as I was looking up things just to have this conversation with you, I saw that you had tried to do a podcast at one point and you had a couple episodes out, and one of the guests that you had on was John from Tale of the Manticore, and him and I had a conversation just a week or two ago, and we were talking about his process with his podcast Tale of the Manticore and how far ahead he gets, and he's usually like months ahead on his weekly schedule, and I'm like, I don't know how you do that. I've tried it. It's worked at times for me, but nothing to the scale that he does. He's usually much further ahead than.
Yeah, I've spoken to him about that as well, and he's kind of an inspiration for me in that way. And the fact that I'd love to be months ahead, but I seem to keep falling short on that. But I think for me, I've just got to get in the process. And while I've got a process for the design and everything, I just need to get into that process of writing. So I kind of figure if I can write the rough draft by the 15th of the month, which I'm aiming for, and I'm sort of on track for this month, then I can sort of just, do artwork and I find sort of tend to find and put in artwork as I go. And I always start with the front cover. I always like having the front cover done for some reason. It just makes me feel like it's contained. Like, and so that's the first thing I tend to do with is find the cover art for it, which sort of sets the tone, I think, in my head.
That was actually one of the things I had on here is how you make the decision on what the theme is and when you set the cover. Like, I was wondering if the cover came at the end or if that was at the beginning. So it sounds like it's right at the start. How do you find the cover artists for this?
So the cover art is the only color art that I use for the zine. And I do it I'm a marketer by trade. And so while I love black and white art, I think the cover of a magazine or anything, the first intro to it needs to pop. It needs to attract attention. And I find that a lot of artistic zines or, indie zines or OSR zines sort of have those black and white covers. And while some of them are really cool, I find that sometimes they just get lost unless they're like, they've got a real kind of emotion to them. And so I tend to find that a lot of the feedback I get is, oh my God, that's a great cover, or that's, and I put it down to the artists. But having said that, it's got their attention, so that it's worked,
Right.
And so they might go in and go, oh, okay, I'll have a look at this guy's stuff. So that's generally the reason I use a color image for it. And sometimes they are hard to source. But I have to do a shout out to Dean Spencer Art because he makes his art available for all his art available for stock art. And it's truly, I've used so many of his pieces in my zine. If it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be half as good. At least the covers wouldn't be half as good. So but all the interior art is black and white. So I just tend to sort of pick and, as I'm writing, I'll go, oh, that might be good. And I'll do a search on stock art and just see if it's available. And I've started to build up a bit of a library and collection of stock art that I can reuse depending on the license. And also just free, like copyright free art. older art, which goes along with the kind of OSR feel sometimes. Like I think in the last issue, number 20 for Deserts and Badlands, I used a couple of pieces actually that were, drawn in like 16 something, so they're obviously copyright free, that I found online. So there's a bit of a mixture there. But
so with the cover art, if a lot of it is coming from stock art or public domain art or stuff that's been made available, is there cases where you're seeing the art and that's inspiring the theme for the episode, or is it always that you've got the theme and you're going and then you go and try to find the art to match it? Like, does it go both ways?
In the earlier episodes, the theme sort of just came to me the month before. So I'd be like, I'll read something and I'll just go like, "Oh, elves, I'll do one on elves," or which turned into the Fae one, that because it was sort of a broader theme. Because it's sort of tricky to find a theme that's not too broad but not too narrow that I could actually write articles for. Like I could probably do one on elves, but it'd be a lot harder. Whereas if I just did an article on elves in a Fae issue, it sort of worked out better. Recently, I've sort of been trying to do these kind of mini series, and I've sort of thought about the issues into the future as well for the next year and a half of what I wanted to do. And at the moment, I'm sort of doing that, as I said before, the mini series of terrain. And then I think I'm going to go more urban. So I sort of did the wilderness, and then I'll go urban and talk about, towns and cities, about taverns and inns, about, guilds and all that sort of stuff. And I might do a sort of mini. So I've been trying to sort of package them, I guess, a little bit more rather than just having them random, and sort of having some themes sort of involved. Although if you look back at the random ones, you could probably pick out different issues that could fit a theme. For example, like I did one on combat and one on weapons. So you could probably put 2 or 3 into that category and have a decent one. And then I did one on solo RPG, so just running the game yourself. And you could combine that with any of some of the others just to create a kind of like a solo. If you're interested in that topic. So yeah.
You mentioned that you started off with having like a Google Docs template, and that's how you basically, is it still in that same software, or have you moved that template to anything else? Or are you still doing everything through like Google and
everything is through Google Docs?
It's good because people need to hear that people are able to put out stuff like what you do using tools like that. Because I think a lot of people get into I must have the best tool in the world to put something out, and having something that's simple and free and being able to see that it's doing something is good.
Well, it goes back to utilizing the skill sets that I have and not and trying to push out the ones that I don't. So going back to the discussion we were having before about graphic design, I'm not a graphic artist. I don't really feel like I want to learn a whole program and then try and do something that I'm not an expert on just so I can do a layout for a zine, that might only last one zine. I could, I've kind of thought about going into, because I've got a couple of programs where I could do that. But then I kind of start doing it, and then I go, I could just be working on the zine. Why am I wasting, 2-3 hours just to get this set up, where I could have written two articles by now. And that's what I always come back down to. And I feel like a lot of the people on the interwebs that I see getting started are all like, "Oh, what program do you use? How do I do this? How do I lay this out? Like, how do you?" And I'm like, just don't. Just if you don't know, take a course and do it later. But if you want to get started, you can just use Google Docs. Why put yourself through that? And I think they kind of see these kind of arty kind of zines and go, "Oh, I want to do one like that." And it's like, you don't have to. You just need a decent cover and then just decent content.
Right.
I almost feel like they're kind of worrying about this because they don't know how to do another thing. Like, so they might not have the ideas for the content, or they might not have the skill in writing for the content, or they might, and so they're kind of worrying about something else not to deal with that, if that makes sense. I don't know. Because I feel like if you want to put something out in this day and age, it's so easy just to put it out. Just blogs are so easy to set up. Like, Google makes it so easy with Blogspot or whatever it's called, Blogger or whatever it's called now. I mean, and WordPress is the same. Like, you can just do it. It's not that hard. But I feel like people just play around the edges, maybe because they just don't want to jump in.
Yeah, I think there's a nature of being of worrying about how you would stack up with what you see around you, right? So I think you may have somebody who they might be confident in their content, or confident enough that they're not worried about the content, but they're like, is anybody ever actually going to look at me if I can't compete against so and so? Which they really should just feel free to go and move forward, like what you're saying. But I can see where somebody might be like, well, if I don't have it just like this, then what's the point? And it's kind of almost a self-fulfilling prophecy there to that leads to defeat if you go that route rather than just plowing forward. But
yeah, I think everyone, I get days where everyone gets to the point where they look at something else. Hang on, I've just got to shut the window. Sorry about that. I want to edit that out. It's just pouring.
No, it stays.
Life. Everyone gets to the point where they look at someone else's work and they go, and I do it as well, and they go, oh man, that's so good. There's always going to be someone better than you, but on the flip side, there's always going to be a lot of people worse than you, or people even worse, people who don't do it. So if you do it, I remember reading or going to a webinar or seminar or something in marketing days, and basically doing something is like 80% of it, because 80% of people never do it, right? So even if it's kind of crappy, or not crappy, but not as good as the other 20%, it's still better than 80%. You know what I mean? And that's what I think people are going to keep in mind.
I mean, there's a phrase that the best ability is availability. So if you are consistent and you're staying and going forward, you can slowly improve as you go.
Yep.
But at least you're always getting your ideas out, and the act of doing that is what's helping you improve as well.
Yeah, and there's so many benefits to it. Like I think, bringing something out monthly. If I kind of did it down the normal route where people, kickstart their zine every 3 or 4 months, I don't think I would do it. It's that sitting down and that deadline of, yep, okay, I have to get something out this month. And I think with that monthly schedule, I would find it hard to kickstart because I would have to be 3 or 4 months ahead.
Right.
And I could get there. And a lot of people say, oh, kickstart your stuff, I'd support it. And I could probably make a lot more money on it. But the way that I've kind of set it up, I just don't know if that would work. I don't know. Kickstarter is something I haven't tried. It is something that I'm looking at doing. I was thinking about doing some anthology stuff, like say maybe bundling the first.
I was actually going to ask you that. That's on my list. It was the episode that I was talking about that I goofed up here and had to fix at the beginning. I was speaking with Eric from Arcane Bindery, and he makes custom books. And we were talking about binding zines and what have you a little bit in that episode. And I see that you do have physical copies available for people to sell. So you have done physical prints, but those I assume are the standard zine stapled prints. And I was wondering if you'd ever do. I mentioned one that I really like being Carcass Crawler and Knock, but another one that I like is Back to Basics. And he released a kind of an omnibus of the first X number of issues. I think it was the first 10 issues of his zine on there. Would that? I think that would be something you could definitely do as a Kickstarter, and
it's something I've been asked for, and it's something that I want to do. Again, I think it's about getting ahead of myself in the scene and then have time to sort of do that stuff. I think life intervenes for me a lot at the moment to try and get that stuff. There's heaps of projects I've got as well. Like there's a series of monster books I want to do. And then with the OGL scandal, it sort of prompted me to push forward with my own role-playing game that I've sort of developed for myself, in the fact that I do a lot of solo stuff, and I've never been happy with one system, and I just wanted to make a system that I'm happy with. And then I kind of figure if I'm going to do it, I'll do it properly and I'll publish it. And if people like it, then they like it. If they don't,
I love how that all the little notes I've taken, we've managed to you've been hitting them without me even having to prompt you on it. I'll come back to the solo thing in a minute, because I have that on my list of things to ask you about. But we were talking about Kickstarter, and you mentioned Patreon a couple of times. So what has been the funding for the zine? Has it mostly been the Patreons, or have you had any ads or sponsors in it, or
so to break that down, so when I first started, it was purely self-funded. The first couple of issues were only like, I think the first one was 8, the second one was 12, the next one was like 20 pages, and then it hovers around 20 to 30 pages now. And then, so that was all self-funded. And then I did a Patreon first. And then because I was getting a lot of people going, oh man, this is cool. Like, this is really good. And you're doing all this for nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I kind of wanted to do the model that Dyson did with his maps, where people just pay, like, if they want to pay, they don't have to pay for the maps. I'm going to write this anyway, because I love doing it. And I want to give back to the community, so I'm going to do it anyway. So I don't want to. And again, from a marketing standpoint, if I put a price on it, I'm going to lose about 90% of my audience. And I kind of didn't want to do that, but at the same time, I wanted people to print this out. Like I didn't want it to be a PDF. I wanted people to have a zine, like, because my inspiration for doing this was really Dragon magazine,
right?
And I've had a lot of feedback saying, man, this is like the love child of Dragon magazine, or this is the successor of Dragon magazine. And that just, fills me with joy, because that is exactly what I was aiming for. That's exactly what I wanted to this zine to be. And so I think, sorry, getting back on topic. So I started a Patreon, and then I had a couple of friends, join, as you do, as all Patreon starts, I think. And then all of a sudden I realized I had more non-friends than friends. And then I'm like, okay. And it was like $2. So, the entry was pretty low. And then not as soon after that, I got a lot of people saying I want a print copy. And so I added 2 tiers, one for Australian people and one for non-Australian people. And I had to charge non-Australian people a bit more because of shipping. Like it cost me, I think, $2.50 to ship in Australia a zine. It cost me $10.50 to ship overseas. So there's a huge discrepancy there. And so then I've got to print it as well and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not really making a lot of money, especially on those print ones. It's mainly the people who sort of just give me $2, where the sort of the profit comes in. And then I use that money and I funnel that back into art for the next one.
Right.
So it became self-funded probably about, at a guess, I would say maybe issue 6, 7, 8, around that. It became really self-funded. Again, using stock art and not, just using it wisely. And then it's sort of, I kind of do make money on it, but it's not enough to, it's like, we're talking, maybe I'll make $100 sometimes on an issue. But again, that's, I keep that money for future. So all that money, basically any money that I make goes to indie artists, or, goes to doing something else within that sphere. So the other thing I did quite late was that it is available free on my website to download the PDF. but I made it available on drive-through RPG, and I put in the description, this is freely available. But for two reasons. One, if you want to support me without joining Patreon, which I know a lot of people either don't like Patreon or they don't like subscription type things.
Right.
And if you want to keep all your PDFs in one place, because I know a lot of people use drive-through as a kind of, and I do kind of do as a, as a kind of,
it's almost like a cloud storage for you.
Yeah. Of gaming stuff. And so it was a way for people to, give me $2.50 or something, whatever. I think it might be a bit more than that. But, as a one-off, I really like this, and I've had people buy like, every issue from drive-through, which I'm really thankful for. So I ran a couple of ads in some of the earlier issues. And I kind of wanted to do ads because Dragon magazine had ads, and I wanted that same feel. And I tried early on. I tried to do like a forum. That didn't work.
That's actually a great point. So I go on binges every once in a while where I'll go back and go through old Dragon magazines, White Dwarf magazines, and one of the things I love going through them is the ads, because it's just kind of cool seeing what was being advertised in that time period.
Yeah.
But my other favorite section, besides whatever happens to be the big cool article in there, is the letters to the editor. And I was going to wonder if you had experimented with that much, or
I tried a little bit, but I think with the internet, like, people just talk about
they want instant gratification on those. Ads. They don't want to wait.
They're not going to wait a month for a reply anymore. And I think some people probably would. I tried early on when I didn't have much of an audience. So if I tried again, maybe it would work. But I really liked the idea. And if people wanted to give me little, articles like that, I would totally publish them. And I have to say too, like, I've had guest writers too. I haven't had any for the last few months, which is why it sort of slipped my mind. But especially early on, people were like, "Oh, I'll write an article." And so generally every 1 to 2 issues, I'll get like a guest spot. And I don't pay writers because I'm not earning enough to pay writers what they deserve. But if someone wants to do it for recognition, or just like, I had one guy who wanted just to show his dying mum that he published something. So that was kind of cool and rewarding to be able to publish that, and for him to show his mum, "Hey mum, I'm published." So that was kind of cool. So I've had a lot of guests, and I'm really thankful for people who put their hand up, because it lessens my weight as well when I'm designing an issue, that I don't have to write everything. And I think it adds to the zine in the fact that you get many voices.
Right.
It's just not my stuff or my thoughts on things. So like, I remember, I think the death episode, I had a guest spot on that, on different ways that different cultures look at death, and how you could put that into your game, and how, so that was really cool. So there's some really good stuff in there from other writers as well. And especially early on, it was really helpful because it meant that people actually believed in this stuff.
So one of the nice things about zines, and I mean, we were just talking about Dragon magazine, and I mentioned White Dwarf. So we've got zines that are coming back, magazines that go back ages and ages and ages. I'm reading zines from before I was born, and just geeking out on it and enjoying, reading some of this content, and seeing. I've made the comment before that it's hilarious of how many of those same arguments that you see in the letters to the editor back then, the same arguments that you're seeing on Twitter now. But it's cool reading those because they're still there. They're still available to people to go and read. Whereas I sometimes worry that a lot of even my stuff, this audio that we're talking on, or what have you, that digitally it may basically get lost in the mix or disappear, or what have you. So having actual articles rather than, say, the Google Plus era, that how much content was lost there.
So much knowledge was lost there,
What's your opinion on kind of like the archival side of, like, gaming knowledge when it comes to blogs and zines and things like that.
That's why I think I like the idea of Knock, even though I don't have any. I need to get them. Is because it's a compendium of, my understanding is a compendium of articles written on, like blog posts.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is great because it takes those blog posts into a print form. And I really, and that's what I want my zine. Like if I could do it this way, I would just have it as a print, but the way the world works at the moment,
economics of that almost makes that almost unfeasible, I would imagine. Or we would have a Dragon magazine alternative.
Printing, like the shipping alone is just crazy, especially if it got to the stage where it was a bigger production.
Have you looked into so I know here in Canada there is actually just like probably 20-30 minutes away from me, if that, there's Ratty and Canady, and I know there's Exalted Funeral in the US and other companies like that. Have you looked at like sending them the files, having them do the printing there and distributing for you from those locations to cut down on some of that?
Yeah, I have, and I think Drive-Thru, I could do it through Drive-Thru as well, where you could do print on demand. And I probably should do that, but I haven't at the moment. Just again, time constraints, I think, and just especially with. I started down the road with Drive-Thru, where you can buy the print version, and I kind of got stuck on one part of it, and then I just kind of went, "Oh man, this is too hard. I just want to go back and write articles." And then so I think I will probably go through Drive-Thru and just have a print option. But it's so easy to print for people to print it on their own computers. Like all you do is flick it from, I can't remember what they're called. Flick it from one style to another.
Oh, and
I even show it on my blog post where you download the zine. I even show you how to print it. The only issue I noticed is that I do A5, which is not a thing that Americans have. They have letter, which is slightly longer and less wide. So I've seen a few print issues where there's like these white bars at the top and bottom, and it annoys me. So just print it A5.
Yeah. There's a great YouTube video by I believe it's by CGP Grey, where he makes it to educate folks in America specifically about the paper sizes of like A1 through everything else, just showing how that's, again, Americans not using the metric system, not familiar with how great it is to have things that are easily dividable. And
the A way of doing things is so easy because you just fold it in half and it becomes the next one. Like A1 folded in half, A2 folded in half, A3 folded. Like it just makes sense. Whereas, I don't know.
Yeah, the letter versus legal. Here in Canada, we have like such a high, like officially we are metric and we handle everything the same as like you guys would, but because we are right up against America, there is so much cross pollination that everybody here thinks in both. Like if I was to tell somebody my height, I'm going to tell them it in feet and inches because that's just what I'm used to. But if I was telling you distance, I would talk to you in kilometers.
Funny you should say that, because of D&D and because I learned measurements through D&D, not through school, because I hated school. Every time someone asks me my height, I always say 6'2".
That's something I didn't consider. That if you got deep into D&D hobby and you were from a country that didn't use those measurements, you'd have to kind of have some frame of reference, because it wouldn't be a 5 feet is very intuitive for me. I can visualize that, but if you
I remember in my head when I was young, I was trying to figure out the distance as you do at any point when you start playing D&D, and I remember we had a hallway and it was exactly 10 feet. And in my house, so I instantly knew how long 10 feet was. But if someone said to me 3 meters, which is roughly about the same, I would, what? I don't know how long. What? I couldn't visualize it, but I knew, and I always think back to that hallway. That's 10 feet, half that's 5. So so I'm all about the feet and inches. Not so much inches, although my dad was a carpenter and they use inches for some reason.
It's because a lot of the carpentry tools and lumber comes from America.
Yeah, the lumber mostly, I think, like the 3 by, what was it?
2x4s and
2x4 and yeah. So so I learned that the inches from him, but the feet from D&D. But then if someone says my weight, I would have no idea how many pounds I weigh. It's always kilograms. So my brain is a mix of
what throws me off. So I work with I work with people from all over the globe, but a lot of people I speak to on a day-to-day basis are from the UK or from Ireland, and you'll be having a casual non-work related conversation or something, and somebody will start talking about weight in stones, and my brain, like I can understand kilograms and pounds almost interchangeably. I got no issue with that. Again, Canada being metric and US being not, but stones and stuff like that, I'm just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You might as well speaking a different language.
Yeah, I think we used to have stones and stuff in Australia, like in my parents' generation, and I'm pretty old, so I think we did, like back when we had like the British pound as the currency before we changed to dollar,
right?
So, but yeah, I wouldn't have a clue.
So I promise we come back to this. So you have a section on your website about solo play, and you said that was something that you're looking into. What is your preferred method of solo play? Do you tend to? You mentioned your own rule set, so I'm guessing that's where you're going to go with it. But what I was going to ask is there a game that you prefer? Is there a non-your game, like something that's not your creation, that you like to play solo, or is it because those weren't satisfactory, you went for your own?
My game isn't quite ready yet, so while I sort of test it out, I haven't really solo played that, but that's kind of what the next iteration of it will be. Just the test, the original testing will be solo. So I generally solo role play D&D only because I love fantasy, as I said before. It's my default, but see, in the world I've created, I've kind of got this system in my head where there's ages, and each age within the world is a different edition of D&D. So, for example, OSE I use for like the old days of yore, and then AD&D comes in at a certain point, because the way the D&D kind of works through the edition, the level of
power increases,
and especially with magic, and the different forms of magic, like you have, and by the time you reach third edition, which is one of my favorite editions, which is kind of where I stopped because I don't like fourth and fifth. Third edition is kind of my modern world, even though it's still sort of medieval fantasy. You can specialize as a mage, and in my head, I kind of worked it out. Like, okay, well, OSE sort of basic, there was none of that, like, and so you can kind of see the progression of magic and the world and different classes and races even, being added to the world as you go. And that's kind of, the same as kind of our world, where you have with technology, where technology has sort of, come so far. So that's kind of how I've set my world up. So I can play different editions of D&D and then add to the world building, because when I'm playing OSE, that's happened in the past, and then that sort of flows through to my third edition games.
So you've got a consistent world between all this, just in different time periods.
Yeah,
what's the name of the world? Because I always love hearing what people call it, because it's to me that's what becomes their game, right? So your game isn't
the world. So the world is Ithia. It's Aythia. Am I doing that right in my head? But the AAY is pronounced E. So so it's Ithia. I don't know where I made that name up. I think I made it up for another system that I was working on, like probably 20 years ago, and it's kind of stuck, and I'll just use it for this. But I kind of used to role play. I used to GM a lot, like most of my gaming has been GMing, especially with fantasy anyway. And I used to do it in Forgotten Realms because that's in sort of AD&D in second edition, and even in third, that's kind of what you did.
Right.
And then I just kind of went, you know what, I just want my own world. I just want to, like, I love the world building aspect of things, because I changed Forgotten Realms anyway, so it wasn't, nothing was canon.
Yeah.
And so I just want my own world. So a few years ago when I started all this stuff, I just created my own world, and that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Like, every game I play with D&D is set in my world. So if I GM for other people, if I GM solo, everything is set. It's just different areas that I play around with. So and also depending on the rule set at different times. So but with solo play, I again, time is a bit of constraint, but I really enjoy campaign style. So I don't like one-offs. I tend to create a party, so I've got like multiple people, and I take that party just as you would normally, just as you normally would play. And it's funny with the solo stuff, because that's how I started playing D&D. So back when I was 14, when I got the books, I think, of my brother, I had no one to play with. I didn't know anyone else who played. I was 13 or 14. And so I just sat in my dining room for days on end, creating, using the AD&D, like, random dungeon designer, rolling up these mega dungeons and just running this party of characters through these dungeons for days on end. That's how I started with D&D. So I just kind of thought it was normal, and I sort of kick myself now that I didn't keep doing that, because I obviously found friends who we played, and then I just completely forgot solo until I started getting, again, a few years ago, started getting into the online space with everyone playing. And then I realized other people were doing it. I'm like, hey, that's what I used to do when I was 14. That's cool. I might start doing that again. So,
do you use any of the common tools with it? Like, I've been recently, the most famous one, I guess, would be probably Mythic, and they just released a second edition version of Mythic here within the last year or two.
To be honest, I'm probably one of the few solo role players who don't use it and don't really like it. I just find it too complicated. Like, and I don't personally. This is just me personally. Like, nothing against people who use it, because I totally get how it helps them. But for me, I'm so imaginative, so creative, that all I need is a prompt. Like, so with the Oracle, I just use a yes, no. So it's, yes, I think it's no and no, no but, yes and yes, yes but.
Right.
D6, that's it. Right, that's my Oracle. So whenever I ask a question, it has to be a yes, no type question. So, like, if I enter a room, like, I've got tables where I roll up, for a dungeon, if I enter a new room, I'll roll to see what's in there, and what could be in there could be, includes not only monsters and treasure and traps and stuff, but also, what's the word I'm looking for? What the room looks like, what's in it, like pillars or, structures and all that sort of stuff. So I roll that up. And so, a room could have, I think I did this the other day. I rolled up a room that had roots coming through and mud. And so I instantly, in my head, in one corner of the room, I could just imagine, and I think I had a statue in it. So I made the statue instantly. I just made the statue the god of nature, but it was an older version. And, that's right. No, because I rolled the Oracle. I went, okay, is this a cult? And it went, no. So I went, okay, well, it's an established religion. So I've got mud and roots coming into let's just make it a nature god.
Gotcha.
And so all I need is one little prompt, and my brain will sort of figure it out, figure out the rest of it. And so when I have used Mythic in the past, it kind of does those, I don't know, these line prompts, like, the green mushroom or something, and right. I'm like, that doesn't fit in with what I've rolled already. Like, it just doesn't. And then it just, I don't know. I just find it contradicts what my head's saying. And so, usually with the Oracle, I'll go, if it says, say, no, and the first thing that pops into my head, I'll do. So, if for example, that, like when I rolled, is this statue of, for a cult, and it said, I think it was no, and so the first thing was, okay, established religion. So no, it's not a cult, and it's an established religion. So that was the opposite of like a cult. And then because the dungeon was quite old, I kind of made the statue an older visage of the nature god, which was a female instead of a male that they use now. And then that kind of, and then I just go from there. Like I tend to use my imagination a lot more than I think most. I don't know. Like, it'd be interesting to watch other people play. I probably should watch more solo online play just to see how other people do it. But I just tend to use my own head, and it just sort of seems to all fall into place rather than a lot of, like, I get my prompts from, I guess, the environment around me rather than just trying to force something from a mythic role into, if that makes, I don't know if I'm
no, that makes complete sense. When I was speaking with John about how he does Tale of the Manticore, that was kind of how he was describing it too, where the momentum of the story itself, it just continues to fill itself in as it goes.
I think on one of the, sorry, I just on that, because John and I think on one of the podcasts that I have with John, we do discuss that around, and for us, both of us, as soon as you start, the story literally just runs itself. Like, it evolves really quickly. And that's why I don't like one-offs. I like campaign play, because with the one-off, you kind of get to the point where, okay, this is now established, and then you just stop.
Right.
And then you're like, and then you start another one, and it's like, no wonder people find that's kind of hard to do, because the first part is the hardest. And then once it gets going, it writes itself.
Yeah, I mentioned Mythic. I first looked at Mythic ages and ages ago, and I bounced completely off of it. I looked at it and went, "No, that's not for me," because I think what threw me off of it was the bookkeeping. It wasn't so much the prompts. The prompts I actually found were pretty useful, but the things like writing down the lists and stuff like that for it, just it didn't flow with the way that I wanted to keep track of things, and so I just bounced off of it. I've been reading over the last couple of evenings the second edition book of it, and that one's done a lot nicer. I may give that one a try, but much like yourself, I agree that you can do this without any of these tools at all, in a very simple oracle, just to help you make some decisions and go from there.
I think one of the themes for my zines, just sort of connecting those two, is simple is best. Mm-hmm. And I tend to follow that anytime during a role play. Like, if, for example, I think, like, there's a good example in the AD&D where you have armor versus weapon table,
right?
And you get bonuses depending on the weapon versus, and I sort of condense that into like a 3-line table. And so I kind of like the ideas of all these older mechanics, but then I always look at them and go, "Wait, that's way too complicated." And I always try and find ways to simplify that. And that's kind of the one of the overriding themes of my zine is just keeping the rules simple, enough to be able to use at the table and not just forget about them, or not have to look up stuff. And I think I just take that into anything I do with, as far as role playing goes, and that's the same with solo. It's just a simple D6 oracle, and just use your imagination, and maybe, and obviously tables for various prompts. But yeah,
will there be or have you done, maybe, because maybe I've missed it, but would you do like an entire, how you're saying you're doing little mini series currently on like terrains and what have you? Would you do mini series on your solo play and highlight?
Well, I've done an issue on solo.
But I was thinking, sorry, where I was going with that was the concept you had of maybe one episode is here's this character from OSE, then the next issue here's one from all set in the same way. maybe a family thing where, you know, the great grandfather was in.
Oh, I see what you mean, like through the ages.
Yeah, something along those lines.
I don't know. I don't know if my solo play is that interesting that I would put it in the zine. I and that's why I kind of haven't done, like, a couple of people have asked me, oh, can you do like a solo play, like, just so we can see how you do it? And I think it would be the most boring thing to watch in the world. Like, then again, I hate watching live plays. Like, I hate watching other people play the game.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't watch.
I cannot really. Like, I get it why people like it, but I just cannot do it. I would much rather just go on solo play, like, you know, like, just do my own thing, rather than watch another group do it. And to be honest, for me, it always comes off as really quite not only boring, but just really kind of cheesy. Like, like back when I used to play D&D, and, you know, people who probably new to this hobby now because it's trendy and it's cool to do, don't realize how much of a basement game it was. And I remember going out with girls, like girlfriends, that, you know, for years on end, and not telling them for the first 6 months until they were completely committed that I played D&D, because it was, you know, something that only geeks and nerds and weirdos did. And I remember their reaction whenever they first saw us play around a table, and they'd be like shaking their head going, what are you guys doing? Like, they just, and that's kind of the same reaction I feel when I watch people play online. Like, I just go, what are you nerds doing? Like, even though I do exactly the same thing, but I'm not watching myself do it.
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Like,
you almost need to record yourself doing it and then hand it to somebody else to edit, and then just never look at it yourself.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, I just I do, because I did the solo issue as a kind of a way to try to impart some of that knowledge that I have, and the way that I do it. So if anyone's interested, they can look up, I think it's issue 12, which is a complete solo one around how to get started and how to do campaigns. So there's a lot of information around how to get started and how to do solo play, but I find none of it talks about the campaign stuff. And so I think there's a lot of people just doing these one-offs going, oh, I really don't understand what I'm doing, and you know, nothing's gelling. And I think that's because you're not, you know, a normal D&D game isn't a one-off. Like, most, you know, start off as campaigns. They probably don't get finished, but they start off that way. And I think with solo, you should be doing the same thing. It should be exactly the same. Like, have a party of characters. So like, a lot of them going with like one character because it's solo. You know, they think, oh, it's one character, and then they die, and then they go, oh, that was pretty disappointing. I was like, don't go in with one guy. Like, would you do this normally in a group of, you know, like, you know, they say never go off on your own.
Yeah,
like,
don't split the party.
Like, don't split the party. Well, then don't, like, create like 4 or 5 characters and go in with a whole party. Like, you're going to be way more successful and live a lot longer than that way than you are. You know, and again, you can like level up quick, you can level up slow. Like, you're the only one you have to please. Like, it seems like people still want to please other people when they're solo role playing, and it's like, you just please yourself. Like, you can eat all the snacks yourself. You know, you can play whenever you want.
Tell me that I'm trying to lose weight, sir.
Yeah, me too. But you know what I mean? Like, it's like going to the cinema yourself. You get to choose where you want to sit. You get to eat all the stuff. You know, and I love going to the cinema by myself for the exact same reason. I can just do it my way. Like, I can sit where I want. No one's going to talk to me at an inappropriate moment. You know, I get to choose what I want to eat and what to watch. You know, and it's the same with solo. Like, that's what I love about it. Is I get to do it. I get to form this whole world and game and stuff myself. And that's the same feeling I take into the zine. Is that I'm doing this, you know, for myself, because that's where the passion is. And I don't think it would be as good if I did it for someone else, or trying to be something else. Like, that's why I didn't go the 5e route, because I just don't like 5e. And the zine, if I did a 5e zine, it would just be very mediocre, because it's just
passionate about it.
You know, that's where the money is, but that's not where my passion is. You know.
Right. So where should people go if they want to find the zine or reach you or anything along those lines? Where's the best place for them to go for it?
So I'm most active on Twitter. So I believe my Twitter handle is just YumDM. I believe it is, because sometimes I use Yum_DM because I couldn't get YumDM, but I'm pretty sure it's just YumDM. And then my website's the main place to get the zine, so just YumDM.com, and my blog posts and all that sort of stuff. And I'm also on Twitter, and I'm also on Mastodon.
Yep.
Mastodon is I didn't know what to do with that because I didn't know if Twitter was going to implode or what. But it seems to be okay, except it's not working at the moment. And then so Mastodon I've sort of used as a behind the scenes kind of thing. So if you're interested in what I like in and out of role playing, a bit of both, then find me on there. Again, I'm just YumDM. So yeah, and I'm on Instagram as well. But if you want to get the issues, all the issues are free. Go to a website, download them, have fun, read, print, do whatever you want.
All right, I got two final questions for you, and
Okay.
then I'll let you go to carry on with your day. Question number one is why YumDM? Where does that itself come from?
So
because I can twist that in ways that's probably not PG friendly, but I'll let you go.
Yeah. Okay. So it started as, because I'm, like I said before, I'm a marketing person, right? And so DM did stand for digital marketing, and I wanted to create a brand with my digital marketing business at the time that would stand out. And so I was just playing around with stuff like the bright yellow and the black, and YumDM was really like, it was available and it was like just succinct, and it was be short and memorable and dumb. And then I went, nah, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that for my digital marketing. That's just dumb. Anyway, so when I started this whole role-playing stuff online, like obviously been playing for a while, but I sort of wanted a brand. I just sort of saw the thing that I made up with the yellow and the black circle, and I went, DM can stand for Dungeon Master. And I was so lazy, and I just wanted to get something up, and I thought I'll just change it later. Like I'll just get it up. Maybe I'll change it later. And I think I started the Twitter thing first, and the website came later, and then and it just stuck, and that's the story. So there's no like, it was just a cast off of another idea.
No, I mean, it fits to the way the whole conversation's gone so far, is that it's take the path of least resistance so you can get the thing done. Don't get hung up.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and it was. Yeah.
Like I mean, if you could have easily just turned around and spent weeks trying to come up with the perfect name, then get frustrated because you couldn't find one, but you just took what was there and ran with it, which is awesome. All right, my last question is the one I end the podcast on for everybody that I do an interview with, and that is, what have I not asked you that I should have? So when I asked you to come on for an interview to sit down and talk with me, I'm sure you had, if you're anything like me, you probably ran through a mock conversation of what I may have brought up or something that you wanted to talk about. What didn't I bring up that you would have liked to talk about to close off the show?
I actually think you covered it. It was really good that we talked about the solo stuff, because I didn't expect that. I'm just trying to think in my head what or
if you can't come up with something, what is something about you that people don't know about that they maybe should?
I don't know. I think we covered it all. Like I've been role playing for like 30 plus years, and I love it. And it actually, I'll end on this because I do find this funny, because I meant to bring it up before when we were talking about the same arguments we see online. Like, and you were saying how, like, back in the day when you read the forum from Dragon Magazine, it's this, or the letters from, editor or whatever. It's the same arguments you see. I'm reading a book called The Elusive Shift, and if you're a D&D fan, I highly recommend it. And it's about the birth of D&D, and it talks about the different groups
Is
that
that the one that's
started
written by
D&D.
Ben? Is that Ben Ring or I can't remember.
John Peterson.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I get the two of them
Yeah.
mixed up because they both have that same historical D&D.
Yeah.
One was earlier than the other, I think. But yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Continue.
And I think he's got an earlier book which I haven't read, but this one is called The Elusive Shift, and it talks about the different rules that people came up with, and because there was no internet, and so some guy in LA so they have the LA group, and then they'd have like where was it Wisconsin or something where Gygax was? Yeah. And then they have his group, and then they'd have another group in New York, and they'd all have their own individual rules, but they'd have these zines, like you said, the early zines, and they'd all write in, and they would go, no, GMs aren't supposed to be like that. They're supposed to be this way, and like the exact same arguments. Like I'm just reading that book, you go, oh my god, this is like the internet in 2023. Like seriously, exactly the same arguments that they had back then throughout Dragon magazine, on forums in the early days of the internet, if you're that old, and now on social media, exactly the same. Like it is unbelievable. And so now every time I see someone arguing about how a DM should be, whether they should be, the judge, or they should be, more of a player or whatever, I just laugh. I just think, my God, this is like the same argument they had in 1975 and when the game was first. So I'll leave the listeners with that. So don't get involved in those arguments, because anything you say has already been said throughout the ages, probably about 20 times. So it doesn't matter.
I think that's a great board to leave everything off.
Yeah, just play how you want. That's it.
All right, Russ, thank you very so much for coming on the show and chatting with me.
No, thank you so much for having me. I love doing these little interviews.
And I hope everybody can go in and go through the back catalog of the issues, and yeah, just keep an eye out for all the new ones that are coming out. And if you can jump into the Patreon and see if you can get yourself a print copy of them. So yeah, again, thanks for coming on, and I'm going to throw this to future me to do any editing that we need to do.
Thanks.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Red Caps podcast. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and that you are eager to come back for more. www.theredcaps.net has all the links to all the ways to contact me, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for listening. And remember, never let your caps dry out. Stay safe, have fun. We'll talk again soon.